I've been a historian for at least 25 years. I've been interested in history ever since I was a child and listening to the elders tell stories. And as for the tales of haunts and ghosts and such in the Low Country area, the area is full of them. Right now, we are by the statue of Denmark Vesey, a man who tried to unsuccessfully to lead the African Americans in Charleston area to fight for their freedom, literally in a slave rebellion of 1822. But unfortunately, he was caught and executed. One of his comrades was a man known as Gullah Jack Pritchard. Gullah Jack was what was known as a conjurer or sorcerer, if you will, who used the people's beliefs in ghosts and spirits to encourage them to join Denmark Vesey's unsuccessful revolution. And he would use that belief to get African Americans who still believed in such things to join his revolt by saying that these haints and spirits would attack them if they didn't join his revolution.
Gullah Jack came from the Angola tribe of people. The Golas, the Angolas and the Dongolas were very, very powerful spiritually, and they were very, very independent. So they did not really like to be captured. Most of the people, when it was that time to testify against Gullah Jack, refused to testify. They were willing to die physically than actually cause harm to this man, because they know in the spiritual realm, he was just as powerful as he is on the physical realm.
Beyond Gullah culture and beyond African Americans, folks who may be Southern or Native whites talk about ghost stories. I mean, throughout Charleston today, you can take a ghost tour. But I think there's a uniqueness when you bring in the word hank or haunt, because of the Africanism that's there. That's the central part that we want folks to understand. That's a part of our culture, a part of our legacy. As we came across on enslaved ships, that tradition, that knowledge, that experience, that know-how, that connectivity also came.
I don't really use the word haint. I use the word hag because it really, I think, connects a lot deeper with the African spiritual world when it comes down to that. When you talk about haint, you're just like explaining a malevolent energy, okay? But when you talk about a hag, now you actually personify that energy.
Dr. Lorenzo Dowd Turner, who was the first African-American who studied Gullah culture seriously, he recorded a number of ghost stories and haint stories from his informants. He recorded a story from Mary Smalls of nearby Johns Island, who said that a haint tried to attack her on several occasions, and the haint changed into a cat and a bird as well as a cow, I believe, and by making different noises.
It can shape shift, it can actually shed its skin, it can attach itself to a different person, it can be a person.
Gullah culture and language, there's a variation, whether you're on James Island, whether you're in Mount Pleasant, whether you're in Georgetown, whether you're in St. Helena, or whether you're on Defusky or Sapelo, all part of the Gullah Geechee corridor from Wilmington, North Carolina to St. Augustine, Florida. But the bottom line, the tradition, the experience, and the knowledge is one. The way the word may be pronounced may be different depending where you are, but the experience is the same.
If you're in your room and you're laying down in your bed and it's pitch black dark and your mind is at ease, there's a very possibility that you can feel breath on your face. And a lot of times your eyes go black, so you actually don't see that energy. You can only feel the weight shifting on your bed. At that point, then your body becomes paralyzed. You can move your eyes, you can open them, you can't quite clearly see, you can breathe, but your chest gets weighted on. You are blacked out with this energy on you. But a lot of times, if there is nothing that actually interrupts this energy, then you will be a different person after your session with the hag. So you have to be aware of all the negative energies that are around you and the people that are around you, because it can be in any shape, form, or fashion.
I think my storytelling comes from just knowing the real story of real people. And I think that's where a lot of my my passion is at. It's telling real stories about real people. I'm a full-time filmmaker. I started my company around 2012. With Haint, I really laid deep into some of the stories that really affected me as a child. And that was that boo hag, man. They used to tell us those stories growing up about the hag riding you at night. And man, that would freak me out. And that was as a kid. And as a grown-up, like, it still kind of bothers me. So that's one of those things when you write, you want to write what you know. You want to write what you understand. Like, what can you write that's going to come across most authentic because you lived it. You can't get so caught up in just the scares. You have to have a good story. Like, you can't rely on just your jump scares and the little flickering of the lights and your music score. Like, you have to have a story that's gonna stick with the audience, because that's the only way that fear is gonna stick with them. If they can see themselves in that predicament of, oh crap, that could be me. So it's all about really sucking your audience in, letting them know you're watching this movie, but you're the potential victim. And at the same time, giving the rules and the world where they can see themselves, like having a real authentic horror experience. The folks that raised you, they're not young no more. They're getting older. Like, we don't want to lose those stories. We don't want to lose that culture. So I felt like our generation needs to be more responsible for continuing the culture and keeping those stories going.
I remember walking by a graveyard one day, and there was a gentleman named Joe Blunt who had recently died. So I was about 10 at the time, and I pointed to the grave and I said, hey, look, that's Joe Blunt's grave. And my cousin said, bite your finger, bite your finger. And I said, why? Because if you point at somebody's grave, the ghost is gonna make your finger rot off. And I thought it was silly, but my dad always told me that when my relatives said such things, to just be quiet and go along with them. So I bit my finger and kept it moving.
I asked for the positive energies.
It's important today in this conversation that we're having that we respect this and not see it as some type of folklore or some type of fiction or something that's make-believe. This is in the experience of Gullah Geechee people that they believe in, that they firmly believe in, and probably some things about our culture and our landscape we may not always talk about publicly. By us being open and honest, 25 years ago, probably we wouldn't have this conversation because we were not in a place and space where we were celebrating or making public the awareness of this knowledge. And so even in this conversation, I hope those who listen and see it can have education, awareness, and understanding.
Let me tell you about old Sarah. That's what they called her down at the Willow Creek plantation. Some say she was brought over from Haiti. Others whisper she came from deep in Louisiana Bayou country. But everyone agreed on one thing. She had powers that went beyond this world. Sarah worked those cotton fields with quiet determination, keeping to herself mostly. But her eyes held centuries of wisdom and pain. She had 2 children, beautiful young ones named James and Mary, who were sold off one cruel summer morning while Sarah was tending to the master's wife's garden. That day something broke inside Sarah, but she didn't scream, she didn't cry. She just stood there, watching as her babies disappeared down that dusty road, and started humming an ancient melody that made the birds stop singing. For 3 days and 3 nights, Sarah walked the plantation's boundaries, sprinkling what looked like ash and bone dust, speaking words in a language older than time itself. The other enslaved people kept their distance. They could feel something heavy in the air, like the calm before a storm. Then came that strange day in autumn, when the sun began to dim at noon. As darkness crept across the land during the eclipse, Sarah stood in the middle of the main cotton field. They say she raised her arms to the darkening sky and spoke her final curse. This land took my blood. Now it shall taste nothing but dust. And then she was gone. Not ran away gone. Not killed gone. She simply vanished. Like smoke carried away by the wind. Some say they saw her form dissolve into thousands of black moths that scattered to the winds. The strange thing is what happened after. That rich, fertile plantation land that had produced some of the finest cotton in all of Mississippi, just died. Nothing would grow. Not cotton, not corn, not even weeds. They brought in priests, scientists, and soil experts from as far as Europe. Nothing helped. Even today, that patch of land sits barren and empty. a stark brown scar surrounded by green fields. Local folks won't go near it, especially during eclipses, and sometimes on quiet nights when the moon is dark. People say they can hear a woman's voice carried on the wind, humming that same ancient melody. Some call it superstition, some call it justice, but everyone agrees. You don't mess with a mother's love, and you sure don't mess with old Sarah's curse. They say her children eventually found freedom up north, started families of their own, and maybe that's why the curse holds, because Sarah's last act wasn't just about vengeance. It was about making sure no other mother's children would ever be sold off that land again. So next time you're driving through the south and see a strange patch of barren earth surrounded by lush fields, just remember, some curses are born of love as much as hate, and some powers are stronger than any chains could ever be.
They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds.
Greetings and salutations, power and respect, honor and respect. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes, brought to you by, powered by, sponsored and supported by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. 2026 New Orleans International Voodoo Day promises an inspiring and immersive experience with a diverse lineup of engaging events. Highlights include an educational symposium featuring distinguished speakers from around the world, including a delegation of scholars and spiritual leaders from Benin and Haiti, as well as art exhibitions showcasing voodoo-inspired works by talented local and international artists. The event will also feature a children's program with an Afro-ecology exhibit exploring the sacred nature of plants in voodoo, their role in spiritual practices, and their connection to our ancestors. The weekend will culminate in a ceremonial procession to 9 significant sites throughout the city, locations where the enslaved were brought ashore, held, auctioned, and where they later found community and built culture. This journey will begin at the transatlantic slave route to New Orleans marker on the moonwalk just behind Jackson Square on the river and conclude with the traditional voodoo ceremony at Congo Square. Additionally, visitors can participate in interactive workshops, community discussions, and opportunities to connect with practitioners and cultural experts throughout the year. And certainly, we continue to invite your support and participation in this live 9 p.m. weeknight, Monday through Friday, weeknight daily podcast. We're always grateful for our participants in the live chat. Mambo, Sally, and Glassman, we certainly are grateful and appreciate your continued support and participation. Ray Alexander, we certainly do appreciate you. And tonight I'm joined by my beloved co-host, the Queen Mother, Sister Toni Martinez. Brother Joshua is en route and may be experiencing some technical issues at the moment. And Elder Reggie is just not available. Picking up where we left off on last night with the Voodoo in New Orleans, Blake Touchstone, Louisiana History, the Journal of Louisiana Historical Association, Volume 13, number 4, Autumn 1972. But many other references in this article are pulled from a much earlier time. We talked about the presence of voodoo demonstration and ceremony, the beginnings of multiracial demonstrations within hoodoo and voodoo demonstration in New Orleans, and accounts given by not just authors and book writers and journalists, but even by the police that continue a narrative about voodoo, which we continue to fight against, re-educate against until this day. The Daily Picayune claimed that this voodoo ceremony was the first voodoo meeting in years that had been interrupted by the police. And when brought into court, the case sparked a great deal of excitement. More than 400 women of all shades and colors appeared, and some 20 to 50 of those who refused to disperse were fined $2 each. The 20 women originally arrested for unlawful assemblage and nudity were each held for $100 bail until August 2nd, when all charges were dropped. Approximately 1 year later, 12 colored women were arrested in the second district on the petition or statement of their landlord that they were about to revive voodoo ceremonies. This 1864 account went on to infer that the general populace was aware of voodoo activities, disapproved of them, and had caused them to be broken up by the police on other recent occasions. We also must note the presence of the Black Code, formerly the Code Noir under the French governorship, but now post Civil War, the newer version of the Black Code, which was greatly curtailing our abilities to gather and certainly to perform voodoo, even in Congo Square during this period, during this time. Such incidents signaled a growing intolerance of voodoo in the Crescent City. Ceremonies which continued to be held in the city were administered most discreetly and involved fewer supplicants. The Daily Picayune reported in 1873, and I quote, formerly the most bestial performances used to take place within the city limits, now in what was then known as the old Faubourg Treme, back of Rampart Street and the old Basin. But an ordinance having been passed on the subject, the police succeeded in suppressing these, since which time the annual festival only has been held, and that on the lakeshore between Bayou St. John and LaSalle. Unquote. These lakeshore ceremonies usually occurred on St. John's Eve, a tradition that we still, along with La Source Hanford, maintain until this day, a traditional day of Banchanalia and for an annual demonical disease, the dancing mania, which spread across Europe in the Middle Ages. New Orleans newspapers from 1870 to 1876 included numerous accounts of St. John's Eve, June 23rd to 24th, voodoo rites held near Lake Pontchartrain. Some of the newspaper stories do substantiate the romanticized legend of voodoo. However, the stories recounted by most of those reporters who claim to have actually witnessed ceremonies cast doubts upon the standard interpretations. And several of the accounts, which appear to be the most reliable, depicts events which vary greatly from the versions of Lyle Saxton and Robert Tallant. A critical examination of a score or more of these newspaper stories leads to the following generalizations. The New Orleans public was aware that some forms of voodoo were being practiced in the area. Crowds, often numbering in the thousands, went out to the lake, hoping to witness St. John's Eve's activities. The greatest amount of interest and curiosity was shown between the years of 1872 and 1875, after which the spectators decided that their efforts to find unusual excitement were futile. And being white Southerners and products of a 19th century environment, most observers thought voodoo to be primarily African in origin, and they fitted the practice of it into their beliefs that Black men were primitive and inferior. Finally, though, some New Orleanians undoubtedly maintain sincere belief in the most occult voodoo practices. They kept their meetings quite secret and thus were seldom or never to be found among the general run of rabble rousers celebrating near Milneberg. In short, the St. John's Eve's festivals on the shores of Lake Pontchartrain were inspired by voodooism, but were not nearly so romantic as the ceremonies described in popular historical accounts or those purportedly held before the war between the states. The annual recurrence of St. John's Eve, as might have been expected, superinduced an extensive pilgrimage lakeward, reported the New Orleans Times on June 25th, 1873. Anticipating large numbers of eager sightseers, the Pontchartrain Railway added extra cars and made late night trips to the lake on June 23rd and 24th. In 1874, these trains ran until 1 a.m., and in 1875, 2 a.m. A ride on one of these trains could be almost exciting as the remainder of the evening. In transit were as nondescript as an assortment of humanity as we have taken stock in for many days. The most ardent defender of civil rights and social equality, were he white or black, would have blushed to have witnessed the many touching and affectionate illustrations of his pet theories. Fully one half of the passengers were Negroes, and of these, two-thirds were females of the lowest order. Once underway, the sports commenced, and for one half an hour, the car in which we were seated gave forth sounds, and in the uncertain glimmer of the lamps displayed phantasmagorical changes that would have done credit to the lower regions. Interchanges of sentiment were perhaps more honest than refined. Whiskey flowed freely as white men and colored women interacted in typical New Orleans fashion. Often the blacks on the train sang and chanted all the way to Mildeberg. There were present at Mildeberg as many lookers on as true believers. Estimates of the hopeful spectators range up to 12,000 in 1874. Everyone, including reporters, was out to have a good time, so the bars did a booming business, and the crowd was quite boisterous. Frail ones, or females with reputations not altogether stainless, were present in force, as was a numerous crowd of well-known gentlemen from the city who go out for curiosity and admiration of certain little yellow amendments to the Constitution. Fires burned at the edge of the swamp from Bayou St. John to the other side of Milneberg. Closer inspection revealed that these fires were tended by festive groups of blacks engaged in pickaninny and dancing, singing, and drinking. Shouting and revelry occasionally issued forth from an old shack where a fiddle and an accordion provided the music for a Negro ball or a respectable party. Hours of tedious search through the wet marsh usually revealed no esoteric activities compared to these two accounts from 1874. The first, we were disappointed. There was no boiling cauldron. There were not even the forked stakes and crossbar for the accommodation of the cauldron, had there been one. But where were the voodoos and the spirits called from the vastly deep? They were not there. They were gone. They had fled, but whither? There was not a waking man or woman to tell. Yet around the fire, stretched out on the grass, lay numerous victims of the spirits, doubtly locked in the arms of Morphosis. And even more disillusioned was the reporter from the Daily Picayune in the second account. To sum up the matter, about 12,000 eminently respectable and intelligent people were hoaxed to the lake to witness the drunken gambles of ruffians and women of the worst character. That about a dozen carriages were smashed, that 1,000 persons got drunk, and about half that number were locked up in jail. And finally, to relieve all this vice, crime, and debauchery, there was not a funny incident or redeeming feature. And so we see two sides of the coin. On the one hand, we were demonic and satanic and were performing some sort of, secret witchcraft rites out on the bayou. Or they tried to, it sounds like what we would call today commercialize it, turn it into a festival, Queen Mother, turn it into an event with liquor and partying and merriment. And then, of course, the crowd shows up and does not honor any remnants of sacredness that may have been present in the ceremony, and was certainly disappointed that the lies and the fables that had been told by previous book authors and journalists, about, wild orgies and nudity was not present. They were then disappointed and felt, according to the article, hoaxed into coming to the lake to be a privy to St. John's Eve.
I kind of think that all the drinking and the dancing and everything was a cover up, and that the ceremony did actually go on, but not where all those thousands of people could see it.
That's right. That's right.
Because everybody wasn't privy to see that. It wasn't a circus, it was a sacred event. And the way the reporter made it sound like they had enough people out there for circus and all the getting drunk and all of that there going on, I think that was just a cover up. And while everybody was doing that and they knew the reporters and everybody was coming out, they went somewhere else on the lake and did what they had to do, the ones that needed to be involved in it. Because the shoreline for the lake is rather long. That's like a second line is going on and a reporter go to the second line, but the actual ceremony going on at another place.
And listen,
and the reporter thinking the second line is the ceremony.
Now listen, other 1874 reports indicated that the police were present at the invitation of the Voodoos and that 13 arrests were made, that Marie Laveau, the Voodoo Queen, was too aged to attend, and that enormous quantities of whiskey and food were consumed, and that the dancing continued all night until the revelers dropped from their exhaustion. As printed by the white press, the whole affair was a time of unrestrained license for the Negroes, when they can get drunk and indulge in their idiotic pranks without fear of interference from the police. But again, it sounds like they showed up looking for a show or a performance, and Marie Laveau was not even there, and the crowd, enjoying the merriment and the liquor and the food, thought they were experiencing Mardi Gras Day.
I know, right? I think all of that, the invitation of the police, I mean, think about it. What better way than to get away with something than to do it right under their face? Okay, we gonna invite the police, therefore the police ain't gonna be looking for us. They're not going to stumble upon us and bust up the ceremony. The people coming because they think they're going to see orgies and everybody going to be running around screwing, naked women dancing around the fire and all this here going on. Kind of like the old Mardi Gras, actually. And Marie Laveau, aged as she was, somebody got her there to the real ceremony and they did their ceremony. I mean, I love the idea that they slicked them all, had them look in one place and they was somewhere else. I mean, that's the perfect thing to do.
And they had vendors and practitioners out there too, selling gree bags and other trinkets and whatnot. Oh, they made quite, the event of the presence of that crowd.
The only thing was missing was the actual ceremony. I love the idea that they set all that up to cover up what they really was doing.
But beyond that, them being disappointed that their party didn't have the quote unquote main event, the overt demonizing, and I keep saying it almost every night, goes all the way back to the uprisings in Haiti, the uprising in Jamaica, the uprisings here in the South are often fueled and predicated by voodooism and hoodoo practices and ritual. The marker that we are acknowledging and revealing to the city on Saturday, July 12th, at 10 a.m. And again, please join us. We're certainly inviting you all to come out, those who are in the area, those who may be traveling, to meet us at 10 a.m. at the Neutral Ground in Esplanade Avenue and Dauphine Street. You might want to come, just a little bit earlier. We're going to start promptly at 10 a.m., the original site where the freedmen gathered before the 1866 March suffrage. And the point I wanted to make is, we may never know what magic, what divination, what hoodoo may have been involved, in this preparation for even this march in 1866. Again, we know that they were living under stringent Black codes, which affected not only the formerly enslaved who had gone off and fought the Civil War, thinking they were going to come back and be, treated as whole men, but also the free people of color now had regulations, Black codes placed on their mobility and limiting their ability to organize and move about and vote. And so these were the epithets, the motivations that led so many Black and brown regular folks like you and I to show up on July 30th, 1866, to participate in this march, not knowing that, the whites had plotted and planned to kill and bring harm to as many of them as they could for having done so. So again, we certainly appreciate your support and your participation Saturday, July 12th. Come a little bit early before 10 a.m. We're going to start promptly at 10 a.m. The marker centers the moment before the march when Civil War veterans and their supporters gathered in purpose, lifted one another in strength, and prepared to walk together towards justice. And I am going to bring the show to a close tonight with our mission statement. The spiritual medicine of voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that bind the master and the slave to the same chain of social division. Inspired by National Voodoo Day in Benin and led by Black community members, New Orleans International Voodoo Day is a day of collective remembrance and spiritual repatriation that is preceded by a symposium and includes a procession to monuments at the sites of enslavement and slavery here in New Orleans. Ritual to account for and seek abolition for the city's and the country's participation in the institution of slavery, and homage to those ancestors who suffered through and survived the transatlantic slave trade, and honor and appreciation for the achievements of those who came out of the oppression. So the demonstration, the march, if you will, is one of those acknowledgments that we seek to make by the placing of this marker. We also invite you to come out, I believe it's on August 23rd. And forgive me, I'm now going to sound like Elder Reggie. I do not have the address in front of me. It's a location that's kind of new to us, but it's in the Bywater area. I promise you I'll have it here for tomorrow night for practitioners who want to come out and work the magic, if you will, with us against the ties that bind, against the system that is operating right now, against the orange pumpkin and those forces that would seek to carry us back to 1866 and periods beforehand. So again, we certainly appreciate your love, your participation, your support. For those of you who are visiting through YouTube, please do click the heart button and the dollar sign at the bottom of the screen. We certainly appreciate those of you in Instagram who show up every night and listen and participate in the podcast, and to all the social media outlets where we can be heard and viewed from, including Facebook, and anywhere you might choose to share and reshare the link to this broadcast. They are all automatically archived immediately following the end of the show by way of my YouTube page at The Divine Prince. I'm also YouTube/Voodoo Thai, I believe, will also take you to my main YouTube account. But following the link anywhere you might find it will bring you back to the archive shows. Again, we certainly appreciate you, Sister Toni, Val, Martinez, for sharing 30, 40, 45 minutes of your night with us at 9 p.m. weeknights. And we certainly appreciate those of you, Cortland Carson, thank you for coming on in, Daniel Neal, Mambo, Sally Ann Glassman, and the Source. We certainly appreciate you, Ray Alexander, and we look forward to meeting you here again tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. All is a blessing, and Odabo.
Good night, everyone. Have a nice night. See you here tomorrow night.
And then they mixed with what was already here, which is Native American traditions and a little bit of European traditions, and that's what Hoodoo became. The biggest misconceptions of Voodoo is that Voodoo is evil, that we worship the devil. There's no devil in Voodoo. We don't know that guy. We know that guy does not exist in our court of spirits. Now, Voodoo is just like everything else when it comes to spirituality. You have your light and you have your dark. The devil and demons don't come from Black culture. They come from European culture. So it's quite the opposite. It's important for me to continue spreading light and truth about Voodoo, Hoodoo, and anything that has to do with African traditions. Anything that comes from, I call it the grandmother land because my motherland is Haiti. It's important to me that people are educated, and I'm taking a big responsibility being so vocal about it, but I don't want to be the only one. And I do want people who are strong in these traditions to feel comfortable enough to step forward and educate and work on removing the misconceptions and removing the misinformation and removing the taboos and the ugly that has been attached to anything Black for so many generations.
Please, allow me to show you something.
They say I'm crazy and that might be true. I got this white in my DNA, yeah, I'm coming for you. It's time we turn the table, strip these motherfuckers on you. I wanna see you hanging from trees, it's time you pay for your dirt and your showtime. You created the monster, you created the beast. Now all this savagery you just gon' reap. I'm coming home, daddy, to the plantation, and I'm taking the lives of everybody, including the children, on some Nat Turner. Oh, do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. I met my girl Harriet at the gate. If you wanna know how she doing, yeah, she's straight. But she had one question: when we gon' get up? All that talking tough, yeah, we don't walk it tough. She got it locked and loaded, got that piece up on her side. She looked me in my eyes and said, "Meet you ready to ride?" Moving forward, you gotta use both eyes. Watch your front and watch your back. Keep your hands up on your gas. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. He sit at the table, but he don't order no bacon. He greet me in those words, assalamu alaikum. Got them glasses on his face and them waves in his head. He go by the name of Detroit Red. He looks me in my eye and says, "You only get one try. Know that your biggest opposition will come from the inside. I know you wanna love them all, but don't even try, because they'll smile up in your face while plotting your demise." Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. We are the children of the ancestors that weren't part of it.